Ladies and gentlemen, we have our next speaker, Her Excellency Sanna Marin, the former Prime Minister of Finland, accompanied by our host, Ambassador François Wu, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, here with us. And the next session is about to begin. I'd like to once again invite everyone to take a seat and silence your mobile devices. Thank you. Welcome back to the forum. And now we're deeply honored to have our next speaker, Her Excellency Sanna Marin, the former Prime Minister of Finland, as our keynote speaker for this session. But before we begin, we'd like to invite our host of the session, Ambassador François Wu, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, to introduce our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Deputy Minister Wu. Welcome.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Mesdames et Messieurs, mes chers amis, 各位女士先生，大家午安 ，Bonjour, good afternoon. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome the Honorable Sanna Marin, former Premier Minister of Finland, to Taiwan and to the凱達格蘭Forum. C'est vraiment un grand honneur. Un plaisir immense de pouvoir souhaiter la bienvenue à l'ancien Premier ministre de la Finlande, Madame Sanna Marin. Prime Minister Marin is a global stateswoman who redefined modern governance, broke traditional barriers, and guided Finland with remarkable courage and clarity through one of the most challenging periods in relation in 2019, when at the age of 34, she became the world's youngest serving prime minister. She also led a coalition of 5 political parties, each headed by a woman, a historical milestone that demonstrated the strength of inclusive and forward-looking leadership. But what truly defines leadership is not age. It is the ability to make difficult decisions when history demands them. Finland once lived under the shadow of Finlandization. Despite enormous pressure from its powerful neighbor, Finland preserved its democracy, strengthened its resilience, and ultimately chart its own course. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European security was fundamentally transformed. At that pivotal moment, Prime Minister Marin demonstrated exceptional leadership by guiding Finland to end decades of military non-alignment. She built national consensus, rallied public support, worked closely with international partners, and led Finland into NATO in 2023 through the fastest accession process in the alliance history. Her leadership reminds us that peace is never secured by wishful thinking. It is preserved through resilience, unity, and the courage to make difficult choices. Finland's story also reminds us of something profoundly human. Both Finland and Taiwan are relatively small democracies, living next to much larger and more powerful neighbors. Both have faced sustained pressure and coercion, yet both have succeeded, not by surrendering their value, but by strengthening their resilience, protecting their freedom, and preserving their democracy. To persevere and ultimately succeed in the face of adversity is among humanity's greatest achievements. Finland has done so. Taiwan continues to do so. 能够在逆境中坚持信念， 克服困难，并最终获得成功，是人类最珍贵的特质之一。芬兰如此，台湾亦然。La capacité de persévérer dans l'adversité et d'en sortir victorieux est l'une des plus nobles qualités de l'humanité. La Finlande l'a incarné, Taïwan continue de l'incarner aujourd'hui. Taiwan understands this reality as well. In May 2021, The Economist described Taiwan as the most dangerous place on Earth, predicting that conflict across the Taiwan Strait could be imminent. Since then, the world has witnessed the war in Ukraine in 2022, the Israel-Hamas war in 2023, military clash between India and Pakistan in 2025, fighting along the Thailand-Cambodia border in 2025, and the direct military confrontation between the USA and Iran in 2026. Yet, throughout these turbulent years, the Taiwan Strait has remained peaceful and stable. This peace has not happened by accident. It has been preserved through vigilance, resilience, close cooperation with our international partner, and our unwavering commitment to maintaining the status quo. That is why Finland and Taiwan have so much to learn from one another. We are not connected merely by geography or politics, but by a shared belief that even small democracies can shape history when they possess courage, resilience, and the determination to stand firm. Prime Minister Marin has been a steadfast advocate for democratic resilience, international law, and the rule-based international order. She has also been a leading voice calling for Europe to strengthen its defense capabilities and enhance strategic resilience in energy, technology, and supply chain. Her principal leadership continues to inspire democracy around the world. We are therefore deeply honored to welcome her to Taiwan today. I am confident that her insight and experience will enrich our discussion and further strengthen the friendship between Finland and Taiwan. Ladies and gentlemen, 各位在场贵宾，请与我一起以热烈掌声欢迎马林前总理。Je vous invite à vous joindre à moi pour souhaiter la plus chaleureuse bienvenue à l'honorable Sanna Marin, ancienne Premier ministre de la Finlande. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the Honorable Sanna Marin, former Prime Minister of Finland. Thank you. Merci. 谢谢大家。
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Minister Wu. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Excellency Sanna Marin with a big round of applause for her keynote speech. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Deputy Foreign Minister, distinguished guests, dear friends. I'm very honored to speak here today at the Ketakaran Forum. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. It is also such a pleasure to visit the amazing city of Taipei for the first time. I have long hoped to get the chance to visit Taiwan. And I must say that it is even bigger pleasure to be here to talk to you about my favorite topics, such as in such an inspiring event for such a great audience. So thank you very much for inviting me here. As for my speech, I'm going to start by telling you about Finland, our society, and what has made Finland one of the world's happiest and most resilient democracies. Second, I will reflect what I have learned from serving my country as a prime minister. I will focus on Russia's aggression towards Ukraine that also led Finland joining NATO, and what wider lessons we should learn from this war, especially here on the other side of the world. And thirdly, I'm going to share my view on our quickly shifting geopolitical reality and what leadership should look like in this new era of uncertainty. But before we start, I would like to share a personal story that has a lesson that I will come back to at the end of my remarks. When I was a young child, I lived in a small town in Finland called Pirkkala. Next to my school, there was a big, beautiful forest that I just loved. I spent countless of hours just wandering around there with my child's imagination. I have so many happy memories from that time. But when I was about 8 or 9 years old, the worst thing happened. The landowner decided to cut down the trees and sell the timber. I, like the whole community, were devastated. How can this be? How can anybody be so selfish that they steal a sanctuary from an entire school and community? I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I was a child, after all. So I gathered a few of my friends, and we decided to hold a demonstration. Actually, my first political action, which I didn't know at the time. And we decided to hold the demonstration next to the forest. But we were just kids, and we didn't know what to do. So we took a Finnish flag and marched around the nearby street and sang the national anthem. This must work, I thought. Of course, it had no effect. The trees were cut down and the forest was lost. But the lesson that we learned that day wasn't that of hopelessness. I will return to this later in my speech. Dear friends, Finland is a small Nordic country on the other side of the world, in Europe, with a smaller population than Taiwan, just under 6 million people. Our geography isn't the easiest one, nor is our history. Just over 100 years ago, Finland was a poor agrarian country. We did not have many things to build on. We had lots of forests and too few but very resilient people. How did Finland become one of the countries with the highest levels of well-being in the world? At the core of our success is the Nordic welfare model that was based on the example of our neighbors in other Nordic countries, the values of social democracy, and wide cooperation between different actors in our society. Because we never had that many people, we did not afford to discard half of the population. So women were always in the center of building our society as it is today. Finland was the first country in the world to grant full political rights to women, the right to vote, but also the right to run for election. This has been a crucially important factor behind many of the policies we have pushed forward over the decades. Reforms in education, social and healthcare, and social justice. For the 9th year in a row, Finland has topped the World Happiness Report, where all Nordic countries frequently end up in the top 10. Gender equality and equal opportunities that our welfare model provides to our citizens are not the only reasons for this, but they are the core ones. But even though there are several things my country could be envied for, geography isn't one of those. As you might know, Finland shares the longest border with its aggressive neighbor Russia, just over 1,300 kilometers of all EU and NATO countries. We also have a bloody history with them, having had at least half a dozen wars with the country over the past 700 years. We have lost land and lives, and we have always been very aware of the fact that our choices and decisions might be met with aggression towards us. There are many things that safeguards a country from outside aggression: rules-based international order, alliances and defense capabilities, but also the unity of the people and preparedness of the nation. Now, when the first two are in transition, to be kindly put, we must strengthen rest, defense capabilities and preparedness. Dear friends, from a small country's perspective, a world without rules is frightening. Without shared understanding of the fundamental values and principles, such as respect for human rights and sovereignty, we are all vulnerable. If we submit to strength in fear, we cannot build lasting peace or prosperity. I want to thank and share my admiration for Taiwan and its people for your courage in defending our shared values. In Finland, we have always understood what it is like to live in the shadow of a beast. We also know how it feels to encounter that beast alone. It is no coincidence that when many European countries decided to reduce military expenses after the collapse of the Soviet Union, thinking that the fundamental ideological battle was resolved, Finland chose another path. The wars with the USSR were and still are in the collective memory of people. This is why we never gave up our mandatory military service and why we have consistently invested in our defense capabilities. But you cannot fight with weapons alone. Disinformation and propaganda has always been used as a tool of warfare. Today, the tools that the digital world provides gives endless of opportunities to attack against societies. That is why civic skills and deep trust within societies are crucial for resilience. Education and structures that enhance trust between people and towards institutions are as important as drones or missiles. I believe that knowledge of people, capability to question information, and education that encourages critical thinking becomes increasingly important as the age of AI and new technologies. As important is the feeling of belonging and togetherness. If a person can trust that society will carry you through also in hardships, and that you have equal opportunities to access education and enhance your own life, you also want to protect others and your country. This kind of trust cannot be built in days, months, or even years. It takes decades of work and reforms to make this happen. When asked by citizens how willing they are to defend one's country, Finland usually ranks high. In a survey last year, almost 80% of our citizens were willing to defend Finland according to one's abilities, and thought that if Finland were attacked, we should defend ourselves with arms. This is no surprise for the reasons that I explained. Dear friends, after the 24th of February 2022, Europe woke up to new geopolitical reality. It was a shift from a long-lasting European peace to a European war. It was also a massive shift of paradigm, as we had to rebuild our whole understanding of European security architecture militarily, but also economically. Besides military aggression, Russia attacked our continent by weaponizing its energy deliveries to the European market long before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia started first to reduce the deliveries of gas to ensure the European gas storages would not be full. After the attack, they cut the gas supply massively, resulting in extremely high energy prices, causing inflation and harming our industries. This has had serious economic consequences to our nations, industries, and citizens now over 4 years. This has also been a major factor in many elections, leading to instability and rising support of populistic parties. And it is extremely important to understand that this was a political move from Putin, a way of using our own beliefs, vulnerabilities, and dependencies to weaken the public support for Ukraine and to make us weak. Why am I sharing this with you here in Taiwan? The way I see it, the Russian aggression in Ukraine is only the tip of the iceberg of much wider battle of values, connecting the Indo-Pacific, Europe, and rest of the world. Beneath the surface lie deeper questions about our strategic autonomy, what we depend on, what we are capable of, and what is our role in an interconnected world. The cheapest option is not always the safest one, and in times of crisis, safety and self-sufficiency matter more than the lowest price. Strategic autonomy may cost something, maybe even much in the short term, but critical dependence will cost everything in the long term. One of the most complex security measures democracies have to take in today's uncertain and sometimes even chaotic world is to map out our dependencies and neutralize the powers dictators may have on us. This means diversifying the value chains of critical products, energy infrastructure, but above all, it means leveling up when it comes to technological advancements. We must recognize our dependencies on authoritarian countries and their growing control over critical technologies such as AI, data networks, critical minerals, and the personal data of our citizens. Already now, these are issues of vital importance for business, health, security, and our citizens' rights. Dear friends, what should leadership look like when times are uncertain and everything feels sometimes even hopeless? The most important thing is to not let fear paralyze us, but to take action. Countries and regions need to recognize their strategic vulnerabilities before they're used tools of pressure. Together, we must build resilience in energy, defense, technological innovation, and our critical supply chains. And above all, we must understand that we need to take greater responsibility for our own future with other democratic nations. To really thrive, we need leadership that makes our countries safer and competitive in a reality where geopolitical turbulence is rather the norm than exception. And for this, leaders need 4 things. First, the understanding of core values. For Finland and Europe, these are democracy, rule of law, equality, and respect for individual freedoms and rights. These values must be protected when challenged. Second, we need a clear vision and direction, grounded not only in our values, but also a realistic view of our options. This, in my opinion, is the one that we have maybe been lacking the most. Our realistic options may not always be the most comfortable or the ones that we would prefer, but only by accepting today's reality can we shape a better future. And only when these 3 principles are in place, values, vision, and understanding of realistic options, we can finally form a strategy that actually works. Dear friends, as I'm coming to the end of my remarks, I would like to reflect on what must happen in Ukraine for us all to be safe, and what can we learn from this situation regardless of where we come from. We need to understand that the matter of Ukraine, just like the matter of Taiwan, isn't an issue of a single country. Ukraine is a battlefield of values and the international rules-based order. If we let countries like Russia attack and independent sovereign nations without serious and long-lasting consequences, it will set an example for others to use aggression to get what they want. That is why right now it's the time to show strength and defend our values. I fully agree what Vice President Xiao stated earlier today. To build lasting peace, we need strength and deterrence of our own. We need to push back the questioning and challenging of international law and institutions and understand what is at stake. Dear friends, if there is a silver lining in this tense geopolitical situation, it might give us an opportunity to improve the way we understand the world and prepare for the future. And here I come to the story that I started my remarks with. Remember my devastation as a child when the forest next to my school was lost. Well, this defeat wasn't the lesson that I learned. It was actually what happened next. After the demolition of the area, our school gathered all the teachers and students to plant new trees together. If we would walk on that site today, there would be a forest. And there is a forest, beautiful forest I have visited many times. So when we face losses or defeats, the thing that matters is what we do next. Do we stand still or do we take action? Because hope isn't something that lands from the sky to our laps. It is something that we create ourselves through our actions. And even now when the world seems so grim and fragmented, when the international rules-based order is questioned and challenged, we can influence and change our future, just like Taiwan did 30 years ago when your brave people chose democracy. With these thoughts, I thank you once again for inviting me here in beautiful Taipei, and I look forward for the discussion that will follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your wonderful speech. Thank you. We have about 5 minutes. Would you like to take some questions from the audience? Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah. So, do we have any questions from the audience? You're welcome to raise your hand if you have any. I think we have one right there. Please tell us your name and organization. Thank you.
Hi, Josh Wang Wilkes from Domino Theory. Can you talk a little bit, as much as you can, about the decisions and trade-offs that you as a former world leader face when you come here and support Taiwan, but when you're actually in Helsinki, you don't really say anything at all, please? Thank you.
Okay, now I think the microphone is working. I can only say, as a former prime minister, it is of course much easier to speak as an acting one. We all know that different countries, whether we come from Europe or different parts of the world, we have the world where we live in, and we have to be, of course, always considerate on different sides, interests, and understand the positioning of our own countries. But what I believed as serving as a prime minister, and what I still believe so strongly now, is that there are some things that we cannot trade with. Those are the principles and the values that we have agreed, that we have signed, and that we have built our societies upon. So we cannot then trade these off. We always have to protect and understand that if we think that we want to crawl under some fence today to think that things might be easier, then we will actually face that only after, and especially when we live in small countries or mid-sized powers, if there isn't the international rules-based order, if we don't always respect and defend the values that we have ourselves to be able to enjoy. If we don't defend those values and those principles, we will find that ahead of us later on. So that's why it's so important, for example, to be here today to speak about the principles and the values that we believe in. Democracy, the right of certain nations to decide by themselves without the fear that it might lead to aggression.
Thank you. Before we end, do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, one last question in the back. Thank you.
Hello, this is Mukesh Kaushik. I am from India, a journalist. My question is based on a paradox that we have a country called Taiwan, a superb democracy, democratic index are very high, and 180 kilometers away from this country is a country which is called authoritarian repressive regime. But 99% of democracies all over the world are having relationship with China, not with this democracy. What is this paradox?
Well, I think there are better voices and smarter voices to maybe answer this question than me. But as I see it, when we look at the situation in Ukraine, and we all can see the resemblance. An aggressor, bigger aggressor, next doors, attacking in depth force, no right to do so, but still, when we see that situation, we have seen that situation, we have responded. In Europe, united, which I'm really proud of, that we have been united and we have been strong in our response, and we still have to do much more. But when we look at the situation in Taiwan, between Taiwan and China, there are the questions of the international response because of the one China policy. And I think this might be, I hope it won't, but it might be much more complicated for different countries internationally to respond. I don't think it should be like this, but I'm speaking from a realistic perspective, and I think this audience here really well knows this and understands this. And there might be better voices and much wiser voices in this audience to answer what is the feeling, how would international community respond if there would some things that might happen. And I'm not talking about tanks, missiles, or drones, or acts of warfare. I'm talking about the gray zone, the zone that it's much more difficult to handle. And what should be the response when there are things already happening? Just like there are things that is happening in different European countries, even though we are not in the direct aggression of Russia ourselves, but Ukraine is. But there are still a lot of things in hybrid warfare that is happening every single day, and we are questioning what are the actions, what should be the countermeasures, how should we react when this situation is already at hand. I believe that the international community should always stay strong and always should defend the values and the principles that I was mentioning in my speech and for the previous question. And without that kind of conviction, we are weaker. And I don't think that we should make ourselves weaker in the eyes of an aggressor of our dictatorship or authoritarian regimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause once again to Her Excellency Sanna Marin for making this afternoon's keynote speech so engaging and memorable. Thank you very much. And at the same time, Her Excellency Sanna Marin and Deputy Minister Wu will be leaving us for the next part of the day. So we would like to thank them once again for their presence and contribution today. Thank you very much. And we will now shortly proceed to our next session, which is panel discussion 3, titled Value-Added Diplomacy and Reconfiguring Non-Red Supply Chains. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now first invite our moderator and all our panelists to join us on the stage by taking a seat. Welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, in this session, we have 5 panelists, respectively from Canada, Poland, Argentina, and the US and Taiwan. Welcome. Please take a seat. Thank you so much for joining us in this session. Welcome. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator of panel 3, Dr. Lu Yaozhi, the president of Taipei University of Marine Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to welcome all the panelists and our moderator. And I turn the floor over to President Lu. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third panel discussion. So this forum is all about security. So at the end of this forum, we will be talking about also